I was raised being taught science. I took high school biology and I kept my eyes open when people were praying and stuff. I guess you could have called me atheist. But now I'm a Christian, and my unique testimony that is exactly the same as every other testimony must be told. I loved evolution from a really young age, and I would have so made out with it if it was a person. But then a pastor asked me, why are there still monkeys? And I realized that I had never actually thought about anything. So just like that, I became a born-again Christian. Since then, I learned that there's all kinds of arguments for Christianity. Did you know that if you're wrong, you won't go to heaven? Or that the Bible says that fools are the ones who say that there is no God? I'd love to hear an argument that explains that one. Also, and I won't get too sophisticated for you, but speaking of Bible, have you heard of Bible? Because if God's not real, then why Bible? Bible. I can't believe atheists never thought of that. When I was an atheist, I used to just sin so much. So much. But now I'm a Christian, and I sin never before. No, seriously, get this. It's so much fun because you can just be the biggest piece of shit, and then you just turn around and ask forgiveness, and guess what? It all goes away. Oopsie, did I make a swear? Sorry, God. Please forgive me. See? Good as new. Works for everything, including fornication and drinking and abortion, which I still do all the time because Christianity totally changed my life. Also, I don't want to say the quiet part too loud, but if you're a Christian, you can just go to church and pray for others instead of helping them. Then you don't have to see poor people or smell them. Ugh. It is such a relief to be a Christian.
Now, I bet Christians wouldn't think that was so cute, would they? So, maybe there's a lesson to be learned here about how we mock each other's stories, even for the sake of humor. I'm looking at you, Babylon Bee. First off, I'd like to thank Shannon Q for performing that sketch for me. Trust me, she did you all a huge favor saving you from watching me perform that script. Second, let's be clear about something. Even if it got a giggle out of you, I hope you can see that it was being extremely uncharitable to Christians. Some parts of it are just false, others broadly paint Christians with the worst actions of specific people, and whatever kernels of truth it refers to are blown up to such a caricatured extent that they become totally unfair. That's a big trick with satire. Skillful, nuanced exaggeration can draw attention to someone's flaws in a way that's funny. But if you exaggerate too far or too bluntly, your portrayal becomes detached from the actual intention or mindset of your subject, and at that point you're at least drifting toward flagrantly misrepresenting them. This is exactly what I see happening in the Babylon Bee's video mocking the deconversion stories of Exvangelicals. Now I know there are different ways of looking at this video. Apologia, a friend I highly respect, made a response striking more of a balance between gently warning Christians to take care with stereotypes, while showing where we can learn from and address the core truths of the video. I honestly think there's a lot of value in that, and I'd encourage you to go watch his take on this. For my part, however, this video just triggered my protective internet dad instincts and pissed me off on behalf of all the young ex-evangelicals whose parents and communities are being encouraged by this video to misunderstand them worse than they already do. So let's go ahead and look at how they did that and why it was so, let's just say, uncool.
I was raised in the church. I participated in youth group, went on multiple mission trips. I guess you could have called me an evangelical.
Sorry but not sorry to cut in so soon, but most deconversion stories, at least that I've seen, are straightforward recordings a young person made in their house, usually with hollow-sounding audio and maybe a decent webcam for video. They're just normal people, often rattled by recent interactions with family or a little nervous about the future, finding the courage to look into a camera and tell their story. But within the first 10 seconds, the Babylon Bee is, through deliberate stylistic choices, making these videos look more like elaborate vanity projects produced with the help of a significant support network. I don't know. This is a minor and speculative point, but I feel like it's important for Christians to get more in tune on a human level with this vulnerable and truly searching population of young people. And this portrayal feels like an either deliberate or out-of-touch move in the wrong direction.
But now, I'm an Exvangelical, and my unique deconversion story that is exactly the same as every other deconversion story must be told.
Alright, so this is dumb. Deconversion stories are not all exactly the same, and this line is just so pointless and non-compelling it's not even worth arguing with. To me, the relevant issue is why the authors even wrote this line. Seriously, as hard as I try, I simply can't think of an honest, well-intentioned reason for them to do so. I mean, all I had to do was post a survey about people's deconversion process to learn that on basically every metric, from the age at which they deconverted to what the journey looked like to the issues and motivations that prompted them to leave to the response of their family and on and on and on, people's deconversions were significantly different. And if they're this different in the broad strokes, think of how much more unique they are in the fine details. Sure, there are common threads and majority answers for a lot of questions. For example, most respondents deconverted at a young age, and there's enough shared experience that it does help to hear each other's stories. But there's also enough variation here that it's obvious the people who scripted this line are not only wrong, but weren't even trying to be anywhere close to right. Considering how different deconversion stories can be and how incredibly easy it is to discover they're different, I can only conclude that the Babylon Bee either knew as much and said otherwise, in which case they were being maliciously deceptive, or that they pulled this line out of thin air without having any reason to suspect it was true or any concern over whether it was, in which case they were being maliciously careless. Now yes, this is a fictional character written for the sake of satire, but satirical portrayals are still supposed to reflect something of reality. I mean, 'cause what's the point if they don't, right? Unless there's that core truth for you to criticize, you're just having characters say random things, and there's nothing funny or observant about that. But what's worse, Christians who are as unfamiliar with Exvangelicals as the Babylon Bee is or pretends to be won't see this disconnect. They'll likely take this as being more or less true. So when the Bee goes on to mockingly say this carbon copy story
Must be told.
they're signaling to Christians that it's silly and pretentious for us to even tell our stories. This is just a mean and petty way of telling people to shut up about a major part of their lives. And it's an especially tone-deaf form of bullying coming from people like Christians who see plenty of value in sharing their testimonies. And if, I don't know, this video goes on to portray her as having vapid reasons for deconverting, spoiler alert, that's exactly what they do, this line will have explicitly characterized all deconverts as having her same bad reasons. Keep this in mind as we move on. Not that I'll fail to keep reminding you or anything.
I had a DTR with Jesus at a very young age. I loved him. I probably would have called him my boyfriend if I hadn't kissed dating goodbye. But then, a college professor asked me how a loving God could oppose homosexuality, and it occurred to me that I had never once thought about what I believed, and I abandoned my faith like that.
So, yawn.
I abandoned my faith like that.
It portrays her as having been an incredibly airheaded Christian who instantly folded the moment she heard a professor ask a level 1 question about her faith. Of course, this is far from a universal deconversion story, as indicated by the 85% of people who said they deconverted gradually, but of course the point is obvious. People who leave Christianity were pretty much idiots who never really understood it to begin with, so they'll fall for anything. Something that would never happen to rock-solid Christians who read their Bibles, pray, and maybe do their apologetics homework. Right? This takes something as scary and unpredictable as the idea that well-informed people leave the faith for a variety of reasons, and the possibility that, it might be you one day, and turns deconversions into this easily understood thing that's silly and frivolous and only happens to silly and frivolous people. Forget the many atheists who'd been well-studied believers, resisted doubts for years, and eventually acknowledged disbelief after carefully considering the best arguments for both sides. And of course her silly thing where she says, I had a DTR with Jesus and then sighs about him like a former crush suggests doubts about what kind of real and meaningful salvation experience she'd had. 'Cause I guess you always have to do that.
Since then, I've learned all kinds of arguments against Christianity. Did you know that there are other religions? Explain that, Christians. Or did you know that some people have had bad experiences with people at church? I'd love to hear the apologetics to explain that one. And I don't want to get too heady. I'm not sure how intellectual you want to get, but have you heard of science? If God was real, then why science? Science. Checkmate.
So much to my chagrin, I've actually heard atheists say this is a funny and somewhat accurate representation of at least some atheist arguments. And I applaud you for being willing to take a joke, and I guess I can't say no atheist ever argues like this, but come on. Watch deconversion stories of even fresh new atheists and tell me how many make points as dumb as these. The trick that Babylon Bee is playing here is really incredibly simple. It has the character say things that allude to actual arguments, but then it has her fail to flesh them out in a way that makes her sound ridiculous. That's about it, and it reduces atheist arguments to something as dumb and uncharitably disconnected from reality as the Christian arguments in my opening sketch. I mean, just think about it. Learning more deeply about other religions, as well as how religions form, what common experiences people have across them, and the implications of how and why they're so geographically distributed, can start to put Christianity in its place, as well as helping you see a lot of the natural anthropological mechanics it shares with other world religions. But blurting out, "Did you know there were other religions?" as if that's a mind-blowing, faith-undermining revelation, just makes a person sound stupid and, let's be clear, was designed by this video's script to do so. There is a lot of science that, in its details, can undermine some religious assumptions, and learning natural explanations for things you've been taught are miraculous can get you asking questions about why you attribute anything to the supernatural. But instead of having this Exvangelical explain even any rudimentary baby steps toward those actual realizations, the writers just have her say, "Have you heard of science? If God is real, then why science?" because it reduces the character to something stupid and they know it. And giving bad experiences with people at church is a reason? Really? That's something atheists make fun of Christians for assuming about them. Now, I guess some people might leave religion for this reason. It might give others an emotional push to act on real doubts, and at times it might lead someone to question some underlying assumption that Christianity produces better character in people. But who seriously thinks bad experiences at church is a logical reason atheists give for disbelief, much less something we think apologetics can't explain? This is frankly stupid. But what it does is makes atheism more manageable for Christians. I dare say most of them don't actively confront the actual large, nuanced body of information that brings up questions about Christianity and the actual well-considered thought process that often causes people to start doubting. So rather than opening this Pandora's box of potentially unpleasant surprises, it's easier to just pretend Exvangelicals just recently learned about and are misunderstanding something really simple that Christians already fully comprehend. Ha ha, that kid just learned the word science and thinks it's a reason to be an atheist. But I already knew about science. Silly kid. The trouble is, this isn't even good satire. It doesn't recognize and skewer the actual substance of the arguments it's alluding to. And while the joke might be on fresh young atheists who don't properly understand arguments they just recently learned, this character does so little with them that it doesn't even ring true on that level. Or at least that's how it seems to me. I guess there's enough nuance that maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels willfully dismissive. And when you throw in the fact that this character's story is being represented as exactly like all others, it's pretty safe to accuse the Bee of setting up a broad stereotype.
I just can't believe not a single other evangelical has ever thought about this, except for all those other ex-evangelicals who abandoned the faith in the exact same way.
Yes, Babylon Bee. It must be a shame when people assume you've literally never considered any real argument about anything just because they themselves have a paper-thin understanding of your position. Such a darn shame. If only we could possibly understand how it makes you feel.
When I was a Christian, I had so much self-doubt. I judged other people all the time, and I felt overwhelmingly repressed, all in the name of Christ. Now that I no longer believe in that stuff, I have so much self-doubt. I judge other people all the time, and I'm repressed like never before. All in the name of myself.
So they have this character list some problems she had as a Christian and say she's still having them as a non-believer. Okay. I mean, I guess there's a core truth to this, and that atheists can be judgmental jerks just like everybody else. Trust me, I know. So leaving the faith won't instantly fix all your problems. However, Christianity does cause some of these problems in ways that are unique and arguably unnecessary. It teaches you to follow rules just because it says that God wants you to, which can lead you to be repressed and judgmental for reasons apparently disconnected from plausible real-world consequence. And by telling you you're a filthy sinner who literally deserves to be tormented forever because you disappointed that God, it's planting seeds of some pretty excessive self-doubt that wouldn't be there if you didn't believe that. So while leaving the faith wouldn't immediately eliminate all these problems, losing belief in something that triggers them for unnecessary reasons might help someone get started on a path toward self-improvement. Right? I mean, can we not acknowledge that? To so flippantly gloss over this possibility in a story that, let's still not forget, is being portrayed as exactly like all other atheists, is to dismiss someone's attempts at self-improvement in a way that's really pretty shitty. Christians wouldn't like us treating their testimonies that way, right? So might it be neighborly of them not to do so to ours? Also, in the name of myself? Whatever. You're breaking the fourth wall in a pretty jarring way when you let the Christianity of your author so clearly come out of the mouth of your fake atheist.
Christians don't realize how dogmatic and controlling their religion is. Like now, on Sundays, I can do yoga or complain about the no dogs rule at the farmer's market instead of going to the church or feeding the homeless. Ugh.
What does this have to do with anything? It sounds like they were setting her up to turn the dogmatic, controlling Christian thing on its head by revealing that she just turned toward a dogmatic and controlling version of atheism. But then she just says stuff about yoga, which she uses the time to exercise, so I guess cool. Or complaining about dogs at a farmer's market, which is supposed to make her sound like both a hipster and a random complainer, I guess? It feels like they were starting to set up some reversal punchline and just trailed off. Oh, and I guess I have to do a part about the feeding the homeless quip. So here we go. This is just a clumsy, bald-faced attempt at connecting not wanting to go to church with not wanting to help homeless people and thinking they're icky. Which is dumb. The first is at least reasonable, and the second just makes you sound heartless and uncharitable, which is why the video artificially tacks them together. But trust me, I've been very active in a lot of evangelical environments, and I've yet to see one church where you stick out like a sore thumb if you don't feed the homeless. And on a total side note, is this video trying to make a running gag of her taking selfies with an old brick phone? This is such a silly, unrelated nonsense joke, and so badly doesn't fit the character they're depicting that it's just a distraction.
Instead of reading the Bible, I can read quotes on Instagram.
Yeah. If there's one thing that marks a deconversion, it's a switch from constant Bible study to social media use.
And when someone is telling me their prayer request, I can freely wait until it's my turn to talk and then make their problem about me.
Isn't this something Christians are famous for doing? And I'm being serious here. I don't mean this as a jab. When I was a Christian, we were self-conscious about this tendency and either joked about it or tried to encourage each other to avoid it. Also, how many times do atheists find themselves listening to prayer requests? This is a weird joke that makes so little sense I'm kind of confused where it even came from.
The idea of evangelism is so offensive. To try to convince people that your beliefs are right while their beliefs are wrong is reprehensible. And I've now made it my life's mission to convince people of that.
This is something I've noticed Christians like to do a lot. In fact, I, unfortunately, employed similar tactics toward the end of my time as a Christian. Basically, you take an undesirable behavior associated with your religion, label it in broad, neutral terms that ignores the unique nature of the activity, and then say everybody does it so it's unfair when they pick on Christians for doing it. Take evangelism. Evangelism is going out and, usually through active solicitation, trying to convince people to switch religions. An activity that can have some ugly connotations for a few good reasons. Religion is a deeply personal part of someone's life that probably has a lot of cultural and family significance for them. So when you approach someone asking them to adopt your religion, you're asking them to give up a big part of their personal identity, maybe sever some important family connections or traditions, and take on an equally big piece of your identity. This is a massive shift to ask of someone, especially on the spot. Oh, and let's also not forget that you can't readily demonstrate religious claims in any clear, factual way. So when evangelism tells someone they're wrong, it's not just pointing out something demonstrably incorrect. It's not just challenging what they believe in a way that gives them something to think about. It's trying to convince someone to change a lot about their life, rarely for good objective reason, and usually employing little more than broad appeals that amount to empty, high-pressure salesmanship. So while not all stereotypes about evangelism apply to everybody who shares the faith, you might understand why people generally find it off-putting. But since it sucks to own up to all this, some Christians prefer to just throw evangelism into a bucket with all other forms of persuasion and be like, "Hey, you all do it too." This video is incredibly obvious about how it does this. It has the character start by saying that evangelism is offensive, but instead of having her articulate any of the actual problematic aspects of it, they just have her say in blanket terms that telling people you're right and they're wrong is reprehensible, which kills two birds with one stone by making her sound idiotic and lumping a lot of reasonable discourse in with evangelism. Most people who suggest that you're wrong about something are usually going to show you why you're wrong if they wish to be taken seriously, and they're not often going to randomly accost you and push for the kind of massive on-the-spot buy-in that evangelism asks of you. It's a really dumb equivalency. And of course, not every atheist's life mission is to go around telling people they're wrong.
I can't believe I used to stand on the sidewalk asking people if they wanted to hear the 4 spiritual laws. How arrogant do you have to be to do that? Sorry, Christians, you don't get to tell people their beliefs are wrong. I do.
So I guess just more of the same here. And then they end with,
I do.
as if it's some huge gotcha punchline that shows the hypocrisy of atheists. But randomly approaching people with evangelistic materials is a unique and aggressive form of persuasion that it's very okay to be critical of. It's not the same as having a YouTube channel people can choose to watch or simply standing your ground in a conversation. And unfortunately, these are the kinds of things some Christians like to lump together under the label, telling people their beliefs are wrong. When they do, they end up feeling entitled to approach whoever they want however they want, while degrading you for trying to have any voice at all. And that's what this whole video does. It says that your story isn't valuable. It says that every time you utter a peep, you're just engaging in a mirror image equivalent to the behavior they are or deep down should be ashamed of. And it says that your whole journey, everything you've started to learn, everything you've begun to doubt, is a silly little thing that they can easily understand and dismiss. This goes well beyond realistic or constructive satire. What's worse, it's not just saying this to you. It's saying this to parents, pastors, and other Christians all around you who might already be struggling to understand you, thus encouraging them to misunderstand you all the more. That's something I have a huge problem with, and it's something you shouldn't have to put up with. Of course, I want you to, while maintaining healthy boundaries, be polite as you can, articulate yourself clearly and calmly, and do your best not to live up to the stereotype. But understand that the stereotype is still unacceptable, and so is the fact that the Babylon Bee so crassly promotes it. This program was made possible by a grant from John Adams, Bob Generic, Maggie Danger, S.R. Foxley, The Crowd Pleaser, A Little Logic, Daniel Bostet, Nademos, Magnus Holmgren, and Q, and by the generous support of viewers like you. If you'd like to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below.